Struggling single black dad meets mom with 2 kids begging for food. What he learns left him crying. The December wind cut through Marcus Ellison's thin jacket like it wasn't even there. He tightened his grip on 8-year-old Jamal's small hand and the plastic bag of groceries in the other. The food pantry had been about to close when they arrived, but Ms. Wilkins, who had known Marcus since he started coming there 3 months ago, had let them in anyway. "Not much left today, I'm afraid," she had said, her eyes soft with apology. "But there's some bread that's still good, canned beans, and oh, these crackers expire next week." She had slipped in a small bottle of apple juice with a wink toward Jamal. "Growing boy needs something sweet now and then." Now, as they walked the 15 blocks back to their apartment, Marcus tried not to think about how the groceries wouldn't last more than 2 days. The rent was due next week, and his second paycheck wouldn't arrive until Friday. There would be nothing left for extra food. "Dad, my fingers are cold," Jamal said, his voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around his face, a gift from his 3rd-grade teacher who had noticed he didn't have one. "Just a few more blocks, buddy. Then we'll make some hot chocolate with the powder Mrs. Garcia gave us." Marcus forced cheer into his voice. The neighbor across the hall often shared small luxuries with them, claiming her daughter sent her too many care packages. Jamal nodded, his eyes, so much like his mother's, looking up at Marcus with complete trust. That look still made Marcus's heart ache. 3 years since cancer took Shanice, and the pain hadn't dulled. It had just changed shape, becoming less sharp but more constant. The memory of her final days in the hospital haunted him most nights. If they had caught it earlier, if they'd had insurance, if he hadn't been so stubborn about the pain she was feeling. Maybe his son would still have a mother, and he wouldn't be working as a janitor during the day and washing dishes at Manny's diner until midnight. "Dad, look," Jamal whispered, tugging at his sleeve and pulling Marcus from his thoughts. They were passing Calvary Hope Church, its brick facade dark except for a single light above the main entrance. Huddled on the steps, partially hidden in the shadows, sat a woman with 2 small children pressed against her sides. The children couldn't have been more than 4 and 6. All 3 wore clothes too thin for the bitter evening, and the woman had wrapped what looked like an old curtain around the shoulders of her children. Marcus almost walked past, almost convinced himself it wasn't his business, that he had his own problems to worry about. But Jamal stopped, his feet planted firmly on the sidewalk. "Dad, they look hungry," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet street. The woman looked up, her eyes meeting Marcus's with a mixture of wariness and shame. The children stared wide-eyed at the grocery bag in his hand. No one spoke, but the silence said everything. "Evening," Marcus said, his voice gentle. "Church is closed this time of night. We're just resting," the woman replied, her voice hoarse. "Moving on soon." Marcus saw the lie for what it was, a desperate attempt at dignity. He recognized it because he'd told similar lies before. The little boy pressed closer to his mother, shivering visibly despite her attempts to cover him. Marcus looked down at his grocery bag, then at Jamal. His son nodded slightly, as if reading his thoughts. "We've got some crackers and juice here," Marcus said, reaching into the bag. "My boy and I just ate, so we don't need these tonight." Another lie, but one that mattered. The woman started to shake her head, but the older child, a girl with her hair in 2 messy braids, let out a small whimper that seemed to break her resolve. "Thank you," she whispered, accepting the crackers and juice with shaking hands. "God bless you." Marcus nodded and gently guided Jamal away. They walked in silence for half a block before Jamal spoke. "Mom would have done that too, right?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Yeah, buddy. She would have. I remember when she made extra soup for Mr. Jenkins when he was sick," Jamal continued. "She said helping people is what makes us human." A wave of memories washed over Marcus. Shanice volunteering at the community center despite working full-time, bringing home struggling students for dinner, collecting clothes for families who had lost everything in fires. And then the memory he tried hardest to suppress. Shanice insisting they didn't have money for a doctor when she first felt the lump, saying other bills were more important. By the time they reached the small apartment they called home, Marcus's eyes burned with unshed tears. He busied himself with unlocking the door and turning on the heat, set low to save on bills, while Jamal carefully placed their remaining groceries on the counter. "Hot chocolate time?" Jamal asked hopefully. "You bet," Marcus replied, filling a pot with water. As it heated on the stove, he gazed out their small kitchen window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, that woman and her children were eating crackers that wouldn't satisfy their hunger for long. The guilt sat heavy in his stomach. He should have given them more, should have invited them somewhere warm. But what could he really offer? His own kitchen was nearly empty. His own son would go to bed with a hollow stomach tomorrow. Yet, as he watched Jamal carefully stirring the hot chocolate powder into their cups, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. Shanice would have done the same. "Dad?" Jamal's voice pulled him back to the present. "Do you think they'll be okay?" Marcus ruffled his son's hair and handed him the warm mug. "I don't know, buddy. But tomorrow, we'll check on them. Maybe we can help a little more." What he didn't say was how much the woman's situation reminded him of their own precarious balance, how quickly they themselves could end up on those church steps if he lost even one of his jobs. The lines between giving help and needing it had never felt so thin. The next day dragged on endlessly for Marcus. His muscles ached from scrubbing the office building's 32 bathrooms, but his mind kept returning to the woman and her children on the church steps. During his lunch break, he wrapped half his sandwich in a napkin and tucked it into his pocket. Not much, but it was something. At 4 o'clock, Marcus clocked out and hurried through the gray afternoon toward Calvary Hope Church. He'd called Jamal's after-school program to let them know he'd be 15 minutes late for pickup. Every minute was precious in his tightly scheduled life, but he couldn't shake the image of those hungry children. The church stood quiet and imposing as he approached. For years, it had been the heart of this neighborhood, a place of worship on Sundays and a community center the rest of the week. Marcus remembered bringing a teenage Shanice here on their first date to a youth group dance. Years later, they'd volunteered together at the food pantry in the church basement, never imagining they'd one day need such services themselves. As he rounded the corner, Marcus spotted the woman again. She sat alone this time, her back against the heavy wooden doors, sobbing quietly into her hands. Her children were nowhere in sight. "Ma'am?" Marcus called softly, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. "Are you okay? Where are your kids?" She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Recognition flickered across her face. The man who'd given them crackers. "They're hiding," she whispered, nodding toward a narrow alley beside the church. "Some teenagers came by earlier, said we couldn't stay here." Her voice broke. "I'm just so tired." Marcus glanced toward the alley and saw two small faces peering out. The little boy gave a tentative wave. "Have you tried going inside?" Marcus asked. "The church usually opens its doors to people who need a place to warm up." "Been locked all day," she replied. "Nobody's answered my knocking. I thought churches were supposed to help people." Marcus frowned. That wasn't like Calvary Hope. Pastor Bennett had always maintained an open-door policy, proudly declaring that God's house never closes to God's children. He walked up the steps and tried the main doors. Locked tight, just as she'd said. Strange. He moved around to the side entrance, the woman watching him curiously. "I used to volunteer here," he explained, reaching into his pocket for his keychain. "Still have the old key from when I mentored youth group kids after Jamal was born." The small brass key looked dull against his palm. He hadn't used it in years, not since life had become a relentless struggle to keep a roof over their heads. He inserted it into the lock, half expecting it not to work, but it turned smoothly. "I'm Marcus, by the way," he said, holding the door open. She hesitated. "Alana," she finally replied. "And my kids are Deshawn and Lily." She called softly to the children, who emerged cautiously from their hiding place. The church was eerily quiet inside, the hallway dim with only emergency lights illuminating the space. Marcus led them through the familiar corridors toward the community kitchen. He flipped on the lights, revealing a clean but obviously unused space. "No one's been cooking here for a while," he observed, opening cabinets. To his surprise, they were well stocked with non-perishables, pasta, canned vegetables, soup. "But there's plenty of food." "We can't take that," Alana said firmly, though her eyes lingered on the supplies. "It's not ours. Pastor Bennett would want you to have it," Marcus replied, already pulling out ingredients for a simple meal. "Trust me. This church helped me through some dark times." As pasta boiled on the stove and sauce warmed in a pan, the children gradually relaxed. 6-year-old Lily helped set paper plates on the table, while 4-year-old Deshawn chattered about a stray cat he befriended behind a grocery store. "You've been on the streets long?" Marcus asked Alana quietly while the kids were distracted. 3 weeks, she admitted. "We had an apartment, but after my husband died last year." She shook her head. "Insurance money ran out. Couldn't keep up with rent. Been staying with friends, but you can only impose so long, you know?" Marcus nodded. He knew all too well how quickly life could unravel. While they ate, Marcus excused himself to check on Pastor Bennett's office. The door was unlocked, but the room was dark and empty, a fine layer of dust covering the desk. On a corkboard hung an outdated calendar, November's page still showing despite it being mid-December. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. Near the altar in the main sanctuary, the weekly donation box overflowed with envelopes and cash. Dusty and untouched. That's when Marcus realized no one had been collecting the donations or using them for community outreach. The church had essentially been abandoned. When he returned to the kitchen, Alana was washing dishes while the children finished eating. "I need to pick up my son from after school," Marcus said, checking his watch. "But you all can stay here tonight. It's warm, and there are cots in the activity room from when they hosted homeless families during winter storms." Alana's eyes welled with tears. "Why are you helping us?" Marcus thought about Shanice, about the preventable illness that took her because they couldn't afford early treatment. About how differently things might have gone if someone had extended a hand when they were drowning in medical bills. "Because someone should," he said simply. "I'll be back tomorrow. We'll figure something out." As he left through the side door, carefully locking it behind him, Marcus made a mental note to find out what had happened to Pastor Bennett, and why this once vibrant sanctuary of hope now stood empty while people suffered on its doorstep. The next day, Marcus returned to the church during his lunch break, carrying a bag with sandwiches and fruit. He found Alana organizing the church pantry while her children napped on cots in the activity room. "You didn't have to bring more food," she said, gesturing to the well-stocked shelves she'd inventoried. "There's enough here to feed 20 families. It's the least I could do," Marcus replied, setting down the bag. "Any sign of church staff?" Alana shook her head. "Not a soul. I found the announcement board though. Looks like regular services stopped about 3 months ago." Marcus frowned. "That's not right. This place was always packed on Sundays." After sharing the food with Alana, Marcus decided to investigate further. The church records were kept in Pastor Bennett's office, and as a former volunteer, Marcus knew where to look. The office door remained unlocked, its hinges creaking as he pushed it open. The room smelled of dust and old books. Sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, illuminating dancing dust particles. Marcus began opening drawers, searching for any clue about what had happened to the vibrant community that once filled these halls. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, he found a folder labeled Church Correspondence. The most recent letter, dated 3 months ago, was from Pastor Bennett to the congregation. It explained that due to health concerns, he would be taking a leave of absence. Services would be temporarily suspended until an interim pastor could be arranged. 3 months is a long temporary, Marcus muttered, continuing his search. Behind the desk, a framed photo caught his eye. Pastor Bennett standing beside Marcus and Shanice at a community picnic years ago. Marcus's throat tightened. Pastor Bennett had officiated their wedding, baptized Jamal, and delivered Shanice's eulogy. How had they lost touch so completely? A church directory lay open on the desk. Marcus flipped through it until he found Pastor Bennett's home address, just 6 blocks away. He checked his watch. He still had 30 minutes before he needed to return to work. "Alana," he called, stepping back into the hallway. "I'm going to check on Pastor Bennett. I'll be back after my second shift tonight." He jogged through the neighborhood until he reached a modest bungalow with overgrown grass and newspapers piled on the porch. Not a good sign. His knock went unanswered, but as he turned to leave, a curtain moved in the front window. "Pastor Bennett?" Marcus called. "It's Marcus Ellison." A moment later, the door creaked open to reveal Pastor Bennett, dramatically thinner than in the photograph. His once robust frame had withered, and his skin had a sickly yellow tinge. But his eyes lit up with recognition. "Marcus? My word, it's been years." His voice was weak but warm. "Come in, come in." The inside of the house was neat but sparse. Pastor Bennett lowered himself carefully into a recliner. His breathing labored from just a short walk from the door. "Liver cancer," he explained, noticing Marcus's concerned expression. "Stage 4 when they found it. Doctors gave me 6 months. That was 5 months ago." "The church," Marcus began. "I had to step back," Pastor Bennett interrupted. "Thought the diocese would send someone to take over, but they're short-staffed everywhere these days. By the time I realized no one was coming, I was too weak to do anything about it." Regret filled his voice. The congregation scattered to other churches. No one thinks to check on the shepherd once the flock disperses. "The donations are still coming in," Marcus said. "The box is overflowing." Pastor Bennett sighed. "Automatic bank transfers. Some folks set them up years ago and probably haven't noticed the money's still going out. Should have canceled them when I left, but I kept hoping." He trailed off. "I found a woman and her children outside the church yesterday," Marcus explained. "They've been staying there since I let them in. Her husband died last year, and they lost their home." "Alana Williams," Pastor Bennett said immediately, surprising Marcus. "Her husband was Thomas. He served as youth deacon for years." Marcus stared in astonishment. "You know her?" "Of course. Thomas was one of my most dedicated volunteers. After his accident last year, I visited Alana weekly until my health declined." The pastor's face clouded with shame. "I've failed her. Failed all of them." "You're sick," Marcus said gently. "You can't help everyone." "No, but a true church should." Pastor Bennett struggled to his feet and shuffled to a bookshelf. He retrieved an old leather-bound book. "Our donation ledger. I've kept track of every penny this church has given and received for 30 years. He opened the book to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "Look here, about 6 years ago." Marcus scanned the page, his heart stuttering when he spotted his own name. Beside it was a notation. "Medical bill assistance $12,478 anonymous donor." "I don't understand," Marcus whispered. "We never received any church assistance for Shanice's treatment." "Not directly," Pastor Bennett explained. "The donor insisted on anonymity. We paid the hospital directly. You thought it was an insurance adjustment." The pastor's eyes grew misty. "Someone saw your family struggling and wanted to help without embarrassing you." Marcus felt dizzy. That payment had come right when they were about to lose everything. The hospital had called it an administrative adjustment, and they'd been too relieved to question it further. "Who?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. "Who would give that kind of money to strangers?" Pastor Bennett closed the ledger gently. "I took a vow of confidentiality. But I can tell you this, you were not strangers to them. They saw your dedication to this community, how you and Shanice helped others even when you had little yourselves." Marcus sat in stunned silence, tears blurring his vision. All these years, he'd carried the weight of failing Shanice, of not being able to save her. And all along, someone had tried to help them, someone connected to this very church. "The donations in the box now," Marcus said finally. "What should happen to them?" "They belong to the community," Pastor Bennett replied. "Perhaps it's time the church remembered its purpose." That evening, After finishing his shift at Manny's diner, Marcus returned to the church with Jamal in tow. His son's eyes had widened with excitement at the prospect of a late-night adventure, especially when Marcus explained they'd be helping a family staying at the church. Like secret agents of kindness, Jamal had whispered dramatically in the bus, making an elderly woman smile. When they arrived, they found the church transformed. Alana had spent the day cleaning the community room and kitchen. She'd found cleaning supplies in a janitor's closet and had scrubbed away months of dust. The tile floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the windows sparkled. "You didn't have to do all this," Marcus said, setting down bags of groceries he'd purchased with his tip money. "Yes, I did," Alana replied firmly. "I don't take charity without giving back." Pride steadied her voice despite her circumstances. Jamal quickly befriended Lily and Deshawn, and soon all three children were engaged in an elaborate game of make-believe in the corner of the community room, their laughter echoing through the quiet building. As Marcus helped Alana unpack the groceries, he mentioned his visit with Pastor Bennett. "He remembers you," Marcus said. "And your husband, Thomas, right?" Alana's hand stilled on a can of beans. "You saw Pastor Bennett? How is he?" Marcus hesitated, unsure how much to share. "Not well. He has cancer." "Oh no," Alana whispered. "He's such a good man. He visited me every week after Thomas died. Then the visits stopped 3 months ago. I thought..." She swallowed hard. "I thought maybe he judged me for falling apart after Thomas was gone. He's been fighting his own battle," Marcus explained gently. "He mentioned your husband was a youth deacon here." A smile touched Alana's lips for the first time. "Thomas loved this church. We met here, actually, at a summer picnic." Her expression shifted to something more determined. "That's why I came here. Not just because we needed shelter, though God knows we did. I came because Thomas made me promise something." She walked to a small backpack in the corner and withdrew a sealed envelope. "The last time he visited the doctor, he knew he wouldn't make it much longer. The cancer was spreading too fast." Her voice quavered but remained steady. "He gave me this and made me promise that if things ever got really bad, I'd bring it to Pastor Bennett." Marcus looked at the envelope. "Have you opened it?" Alana shook her head. "It wasn't addressed to me. But now, with Pastor Bennett sick..." She handed it to Marcus. "Maybe you should have it." The envelope was sealed but unmarked except for a small cross drawn in the corner. Marcus carefully opened it and found a bank statement and a handwritten letter. The statement showed a transfer of $5,000 to the church's outreach fund dated just 2 weeks before Thomas's death. The letter read, "Pastor Bennett, if Alana brings you this, it means she needs help. Please use the enclosed funds to support her and our children. More importantly, please remind her of what we always believed, that the work we do for others lives on, even when we're gone. 6 years ago, you helped me do something important. A man in our congregation was about to lose his wife to cancer, and we anonymously covered her hospital bills. That man never knew it was me. You taught me that the most meaningful gifts come without recognition. Please tell Alana this story. Tell her about Marcus Ellison and his wife Shanice. Tell her how much joy it brought me to help them, and how I believe that kindness creates ripples we can't always see. With faith and gratitude, Thomas." Marcus's hands trembled as he read the words again. Thomas Williams, Alana's husband, had been the anonymous donor who paid Shanice's hospital bills. The man whose children were now playing with Jamal, whose widow stood before him, had once saved his family from financial ruin. "What is it?" Alana asked, concerned by his silence. Marcus struggled to find words. "Your husband, he was a remarkable man." "Yes," she agreed softly. "But how would you know that?" Carefully, Marcus explained what he had learned from Pastor Bennett and the letter, how Thomas had anonymously paid for his wife's medical bills years ago, how that act of kindness had prevented Marcus's family from complete financial collapse after Shanice's death. "He never told me specifically who he helped," Alana said, tears streaming down her face. "Just that there was a family in the church where the wife was sick, and they couldn't afford treatment. He said it was the most meaningful thing he'd ever done with money. She looked at Marcus with new understanding. And now you're helping us without even knowing that connection. Full circle, Marcus murmured, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the December cold. They both turned to watch their children playing together, Jamal helping little Deshaun build a tower of blocks, Lily directing the operation with the confidence of a 6-year-old architect. These children, connected by invisible threads of kindness their parents had woven years before. Thomas wanted the money to help you, Marcus said finally. And there's still the donation box. Pastor Bennett said it belongs to the community now. Alana wiped away her tears and squared her shoulders. I don't want handouts, Marcus. I want to rebuild, for my kids, for myself. Thomas would want that too. Not handouts, Marcus agreed. But maybe this church could become what it once was. A place that supports the community. There's still so much need out there. A slow smile spread across Alana's face. Thomas always said this church was more than a building. It was the heartbeat of hope for this neighborhood. She glanced around at the space she had restored. Maybe it still can be. As their children laughed in the background, Marcus and Alana began to plan, unaware that what had started as one man's act of compassion on a cold winter night would grow into something neither of them could have imagined. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. It started with Marcus making phone calls to former church members he remembered from his volunteering days. Then Alana reached out to families she and Thomas had known through the youth program. By the second weekend, 20 people gathered in the church basement, sitting in a circle of folding chairs, listening to Marcus explain what had happened to Pastor Bennett and the church. So that's where we are, Marcus concluded, standing awkwardly before the impromptu assembly. He'd never been comfortable with public speaking. The building's still here. The resources are still here. The need is definitely still here. What's missing is the people. And Pastor Bennett, added Mrs. Rodriguez, who had taught Sunday school for decades. We can't replace him. We're not trying to, Alana said, rising to stand beside Marcus. But he devoted his life to making this place a sanctuary for everyone. I think the best way to honor him is to continue that work. There were nods of agreement, then practical questions emerged. Who would handle the finances? Who had keys to which rooms? What programs should they prioritize? As the adults debated logistics, the children played tag around the perimeter of the room, their laughter providing a soundtrack to the planning. Marcus watched Jamal chasing Lily and Deshaun, his son's face bright with joy. In the 3 weeks since they'd met Alana's family, Jamal had transformed from a quiet, serious child into an exuberant boy with friends. The change brought an ache to Marcus's heart. Had his son been lonely all this time without him noticing? The meeting concluded with assignments distributed and a follow-up scheduled. As everyone filed out, Marcus noticed one man lingering behind. You don't remember me, do you? The man asked. Marcus studied the stranger's face. I'm sorry, I don't. Ray Winters. Used to work at County Hospital in Billing. He extended his hand. I was the one who processed the administrative adjustment on your wife's account all those years ago. Marcus felt a jolt of recognition. You knew? About the anonymous donation? Ray nodded. Pastor Bennett arranged it. Said a church member wanted to help but needed absolute confidentiality. I've always wondered what happened to your family after. We survived, Marcus said simply. Not all at once, and not without scars. But we survived. I'm glad to hear it. Ray handed Marcus a business card. I'm the finance director at Mercy Health System now. When you get this place up and running again, call me. I'd like to help establish a proper medical assistance fund. News of the church's revival continued to spread. A local grocery store offered to donate day-old bread and produce twice weekly. A contractor who'd grown up attending youth group volunteered to inspect the building and make necessary repairs. The owner of a web design company, a young woman who remembered Shanice tutoring her in math, built a simple website where people could sign up to volunteer or donate. 2 weeks after the initial meeting, they held their first community dinner. 50 people showed up, some to help, others in need, many simply curious about what was happening at the old church. Tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes, and the kitchen hummed with activity as volunteers washed dishes and packed leftovers into containers for guests to take home. Marcus found himself working alongside Alana throughout the evening, their movements settling into a comfortable rhythm as they served food, directed volunteers, and ensured everyone felt welcome. Something had shifted between them since discovering their shared connection through Thomas. Not romance, not yet, but a deep understanding that felt like solid ground beneath their feet. Halfway through the evening, the side door opened, and Pastor Bennett entered, supported by a home health aide. The room fell silent before erupting in cheers and tearful greetings. The elderly pastor was helped to a chair where he held court, his frail body contrasting with the vibrant energy in his eyes as he greeted old friends and met new community members. When the crowd thinned around him, Marcus approached with Alana and the children. "You've done a miraculous thing here," Pastor Bennett said, his voice thin but clear. "Both of you. We just picked up where you left off," Marcus replied. The pastor shook his head. "No, you've created something new. Something necessary." He reached for Alana's hand. "Thomas would be so proud of you. I found his letter," she told him. "I know everything." Pastor Bennett's eyes moved between Alana and Marcus. "Then you understand why this matters so much. One act of kindness, given freely without expectation of return or recognition, it changes everything." As they spoke, Jamal approached with a plate of food for the pastor. At 8 years old, he had appointed himself an official helper, taking the role seriously. "Thank you, young man," Pastor Bennett said. "You remind me of your mother." Jamal's eyes widened. "You knew my mom?" "Oh yes," the pastor replied with a gentle smile. "She had the same kind eyes. The same way of helping without making a fuss about it." Later that night, after the guests had gone and the children had fallen asleep in the now furnished activity room that served as their temporary home, Marcus and Alana sat in the quiet sanctuary. The moonlight filtered through the stained glass, painting colored patterns across the wooden pews. "We're really doing this," Alana said, wonderment in her voice. Marcus nodded. "One step at a time. It doesn't fix everything," she admitted. "I still don't have a job or a permanent place to live. You're still working 2 jobs to make ends meet." "True," Marcus agreed. "But we're not alone anymore. That's a start." Outside, snow began to fall, covering the neighborhood in a blanket of white. Inside, the sanctuary stood warm and ready, its purpose rediscovered by the very people it was meant to serve. Spring arrived with a gentle warmth that seemed to mirror the transformation at Calvary Hope Church. For months had passed since that cold December night when Marcus first encountered Alana and her children on the church steps. The once abandoned building now bustled with activities 7 days a week. The fellowship hall hosted community dinners every Wednesday and Sunday. The basement housed a revitalized food pantry that served over 100 families weekly. The classroom wing, once used only for Sunday school, now offered after-school tutoring, ESL classes for adults, and job skills workshops. Where there had been silence, there was now life. On this particular Sunday morning, sunshine streamed through the stained glass windows as people filed into the sanctuary for a special service. Pastor Bennett had asked to address the congregation one last time. His health had deteriorated rapidly in recent weeks, and everyone understood what this gathering truly meant. Marcus stood at the back of the sanctuary, directing volunteers and greeting newcomers. He wore a simple suit, borrowed from Ray Winters, instead of his usual work clothes. For the first time in years, he wasn't rushing between jobs. The church board had voted unanimously to hire him as Community Outreach Coordinator, a paid position funded by the donations that continued to flow, and now that people could see their money making a tangible difference. Alana moved through the crowd in a blue dress, her hair styled neatly, looking nothing like the desperate woman Marcus had first met. She'd found work as an administrative assistant at Mercy Health System, another connection forged through their growing community. She and her children had moved into a small apartment just 2 blocks from the church, though they still spent most of their waking hours in the building that had become their salvation. As the music began, Marcus took his seat beside Jamal, who sat between him and Deshaun. The boys had become inseparable over the past months, with Jamal proudly assuming the role of big brother. Lily sat on Alana's lap, singing along with the hymns in a clear, sweet voice that carried above the adult voices around her. Pastor Bennett was wheeled to the front by his home health aide. Though his body had grown frailier, his voice rang out with surprising strength as he addressed the congregation. "When I fell ill," he began, "I thought my life's work was ending in failure. I watched this sanctuary empty, saw our community programs shut down, and believed I had failed both you and God." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the packed room. "I have never been so happy to be proven wrong." Gentle laughter rippled through the assembly. "Today, I want to honor two people who reminded me what this church has always been about." He gestured toward Marcus and Alana. "Please join me at the front." Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety as he and Alana made their way forward. Public recognition had never been comfortable for him. "This man," Pastor Bennett said, pointing to Marcus, "gave away food he couldn't spare to a stranger in need. This woman," he continued, indicating Alana, "maintained her dignity and faith through unimaginable hardship. Neither knew that their paths had crossed before, invisibly connected through an act of generosity years ago." The pastor reached for a frame that his aide held. "This prayer was written by Shanice Ellison before she passed away. Her husband found it among her things and shared it with me." Marcus's eyes widened. He had indeed found the handwritten prayer among Shanice's journals after her death, and had given it to Pastor Bennett for her funeral service. He'd forgotten about it until this moment. The framed prayer read, "Let the kindness we show others echo beyond our sight, touching lives we may never know, in ways we may never witness. This is faith made visible. Today, I'm placing this beside our donation box," Pastor Bennett announced, "as a reminder of why we give, why we serve, why we open our doors to all who need shelter, whether from storms outside or within." As the congregation applauded, Marcus noticed Jamal wiping tears from his eyes. He knelt beside his son. "You okay, buddy? Mom would be really happy about all this, wouldn't she?" Jamal whispered. "Yes," Marcus said, his own voice thick with emotion. "She really would." After the service, people lingered in the sanctuary and spilled out onto the lawn. Children played tag between the flowering dogwood trees. Volunteers served coffee and homemade pastries. Community members exchanged phone numbers and made plans to help each other with home repairs, childcare, and ride-sharing. Marcus found himself standing beside Alana as they watched their children racing across the grass. "Thomas would be proud of you," he said quietly. "Shanice would be proud of you too," she replied. Their hands found each other's, fingers intertwining naturally, as if completing a circuit that had been waiting to be connected. Late that afternoon, as the last visitors departed, Marcus and Alana walked Pastor Bennett to his car. The elderly man looked exhausted but content. "You've given me a great gift," he told them. "The chance to see God's work continue. We just followed your example," Alana said, leaning down to embrace him. Pastor Bennett shook his head. "No, you followed your hearts. That's all anyone can do." As the car pulled away, Marcus and Alana stood watching until it disappeared around the corner. Neither spoke of the fact that it might be the last time they would see him in this life. Some truths didn't need words. Inside, they found Jamal helping Lily and Deshaun clean up art supplies from the afternoon's activities. The children worked together seamlessly, their friendship now a sturdy foundation in all their lives. Marcus looked around at the sanctuary, at the well-used hymnals, the donation box topped with Shanice's framed prayer, the bulletin board crowded with community announcements, the calendar filled with events. What had begun as a simple act of giving away crackers and juice on a cold night had blossomed into something that would outlast all of them. "Sometimes," he said softly to Alana, "the kindness we offer is the echo of kindness we once received, even if we never knew it at the time." She nodded, understanding perfectly what he meant. "And sometimes," she added, "it's the beginning of something new." Together, they closed the church doors as the setting sun bathed the stained glass in golden light, turning the ordinary into something sacred.